Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from Spain and it's a co-production with Bosnia-Herzegovina. Bosnian language with English subs, released in the year 2017, directed by Yaya Arrero, and this film is called The Mouse. So The Mouse is about this Bosnian woman. She's had a very troubled past. Back during the Bosnian War, her family was slaughtered and they went missing. And so she doesn't know exactly what happened to them, but many years passed and now she has since been in a relationship with a German boyfriend. She lives in Germany, but when she's told that her family have been discovered in a mass grave, she comes to Bosnia with her loved one in order to try and give them a proper farewell. And so after they've done this, they are travelling back to the airport to go back to Germany, but when they go through this forest, they break down, they have car troubles, and so they don't know what to do, and they decide to trek through the forest in order to try and find someone. And they actually find someone, actually two men they find, and they appear to be friendly, but then very soon they discover that they are anything but friendly, and in fact they're quite sinister for reasons that are much more complex than they imagined. And so as the situation starts to get worse, this couple realise that they have to really bank on each other to try and get through this if they are to see another day. So whether or not they survive this predicament is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on The Mouse. I was really excited to see this movie because for one particular reason, and that reason is that it touches on a very, very touchy subject. Now this is the Balkan War, where Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, basically the old Yugoslavia were involved in this. And so this is an era and time in the 90s that really divided the world. And this is a very touchy subject still for people in this region. And that it is something that will get a lot of people very angry. And so whenever a film depicts this, I think it's very brave filmmaking. And so Yaya Arrero has created something of interest just by the fact that he's taken on this subject. And a lot of other films have done this in the past. I believe that you had Tangerines, you've got No Man's Land, got all these films that depict this style, this era, and they do it with a lot of bravery, and they come across as absolute masterpieces. And so when I heard about The Mouse, I heard that this movie has divided opinion. A lot of people liked it, and a lot of people absolutely despised it. So that is an ingredient for a very interesting experience. And the best thing I can say about The Mouse is that it is very interesting, but I don't think it really capitalises much upon that. I don't think it's really as good as it could have been because it was just a little bit lazier than those films that I've just mentioned. Now to start off with, this is a very visceral film. This is a very cruel film, and I think the cruelty really symbolises that era and that area of the world and how all these people were put through all these horrors. And I think the horror of the cinematography and the horror of the ambience really magnifies that feeling where you can actually get an insight into this woman's mind. This woman, the main character, she's absolutely torn by what's happened, and I think that the cinematography being very dreary and a very cruel, unforgiving environment and feeling that the film has really gives you that input into someone that is really, really damaged. And I could feel her pain and suffering as to what's happened in her past. And so as the movie transpires, this is a very symbolic film, and that's what I really liked. It's a very different way of storytelling. And so the different storytelling is a welcome breath of fresh air in a world of remakes and just standard slashers as far as horror is concerned. This is a movie not so much a slasher or basically a trek into the woods. It's more a symbolism of a real-life horror, and the real-life horror of that carnage and the real-life horror of the war has symbolised that horror element, and the horror element is always lingering above these characters, and that's the cruelty and the very challenging experience that you're about to have. It's a very brutal sort of film. The violence is very few and far between, so I like the fact that this director relies on the storytelling as opposed to cheap tricks as far as visuals are concerned. But visually it is very arresting. I believe this movie was actually shot in Spain, but I actually believe that it was Bosnia. The landmines are everywhere, so there was danger around every corner, and there was also danger within this woman's mind, is because she was basically turning into someone that she wasn't initially, but this is the effects of war. I thought the villains were very stereotypical, which is something I didn't like. I'll go into a little bit later, but the acting was fairly decent from everybody involved, but there was a certain level of cardboard quality to these characters, which is a good and bad thing. The good thing is that the cardboard characters were more of a symbolisation of something much bigger, which is something I'm not going to go into because I don't want to spoil it. But the movie, as I said, is that symbolism. It's not so much a case of what's going on in front of you, it's how the world looked at this conflict and how they reacted to conflict. So a certain character represented a certain aspect of the world during this carnage. So that's the very interesting aspect that the film has, and that's the reason why I would say go out out there and check it out is because it's definitely something you haven't seen before. It is a very confusing film, so be very careful of that. That's something that I can applaud and I can criticise as well. And so that's the biggest problem with the film, is that with a positive comes a negative. Now, as I said, the way the storytelling, it's very, very convoluted, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Right at the end of the film, the very last shot, I thought to myself, well, what was that all about? And so yes, the movie is forcing you to draw your own interpretation, but unfortunately it's a little bit too mysterious for those interpretations to be as rewarding as other films. I think the simplicity of the movie, it would have been a lot better if there was more simplicity. I think it's just the fact that it's so convoluted. Yes, it will appeal to fans that want something a little bit more as far as horror is concerned, but I don't think, I thought it was just a little bit too confused. I don't think the director had a really clear vision of where he wanted this film to go, and so that was a problem. And another problem I had with the film is that I didn't really sympathise with the characters themselves. As I said, I sympathised with the symbolic meaning that these characters were, but I didn't sympathise for them as the people that they were. And so this woman, this boyfriend, I thought the boyfriend was very, very bland. I thought the woman, yeah, she's gone through all these hardships, but I didn't feel as though I connected to her as a person. And so if you have that symbolic and the general sort of meaning, that's something that, okay, I can applaud, but it doesn't really hit you as much as an emotional connection with an individual in particular. And so, yeah, I have to be very careful I don't give anything away. It's a very easy film to spoil, but hopefully you know what I mean, is that these characters feel as though they're symbolising something else as opposed to a genuine human being. And so I didn't really like that. I thought the acting, they played it, they didn't really have too much to play with, and so they weren't bad, but then again, they weren't anything brilliant. So I thought that something was missing, and what was missing was that human connection, not just the general sort of symbolic look at a conflict in that era. And so it's a very well made film. I can applaud Yaya Herrera for actually trying something different, and something different that is going to split people down the middle. If I have another problem before I finish, it was with the villains. Now, the villains are very stereotypical, and this is something I don't like. When you've got a conflict and the world says that this side was bad and this side was good, then you actually play that in a film. This is what's going to divide opinion. The reason why Tangerines and No Man's Land was so great is because, yes, they depicted this era, this area of the world and this conflict, but they didn't play sides. Basically what they were doing was showing you the waste of war, and that the real villain was war itself. And so I thought that was really interesting, in not taking sides, telling a story that's going to appeal to everybody and show everybody that the carnage is war. But in this movie, they don't really do that. Yes, it's shown you, as I said, the symbolism of how destructive war can be and the impact it can have on people, but unfortunately it just didn't have that very grey area where it actually makes you feel as though you're connecting to something, and it's showing you, as I said, that war is the real villain. But when you're actually taking sides like this film does to a degree, I just believe that, okay, I would have liked it with a little bit more complexity as far as that's concerned. But pushing that aside, it's not a terrible film at all. It's a movie that I would say go out there and see. It's very interesting, but unfortunately that's where it stays at. It's just an interesting film. It's nothing great. So overall, for the MAUS, going to give this one 3 stars. I appreciate it for what it was, but I believe that it could have been a little bit better. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.